I want you to imagine looking at the most famous photograph of Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah. The 1941 portrait.
Right. You almost certainly know the exact one I'm talking about. He's got his hand planted on his hip.
Head thrust slightly forward.
Exactly. Looking like this glaring, unmovable god of war, just, staring down the entire machinery of fascism.
It's an incredibly powerful image.
It is. But, well, what if I told you that you aren't looking at a natural display of defiance at all?
Wait, you mean he wasn't naturally striking that pose?
You're not even close. You are actually looking at a tired, highly stressed old man who is just intensely personally irritated because someone just walked up and stole his cigar.
Oh, wow. That completely shatters the deeply romantic belief we all carry around about photography, doesn't it?
It really does.
I mean, we treat the camera lens as a flawless mirror. We think of it as this unbiased witness that just freezes reality exactly as it happens, like snatching a pristine, truthful moment right out of the flow of time.
But today, we are systematically dismantling that illusion. Because when you look at the absolute highest levels of historical portraiture, the camera doesn't capture truth.
Right. It manufactures it from scratch.
Exactly. It's an image manufacturing factory. And before we really get into the mechanics of how that works, I need to clearly state that this episode is part of the SanalSergi Photography History series.
Which is, honestly, the perfect framework for this deep dive because we are looking at the legacy of Yousuf Karsh.
Oh, Karsh.
Yeah, I mean, if you have ever seen a definitive historical portrait of a 20th century icon, there's a very high probability Karsh took it.
Yeah, his work is everywhere.
It is. But looking closely at the source material, it becomes overwhelmingly clear that Karsh was never just taking pictures. He was operating as an architect of power.
Which is so interesting because usually we think of photography like, I don't know, trying to catch a butterfly in a net.
Right. You wait out in the field for that perfect fleeting moment. Yeah, spontaneous, and then you snap the shutter to catch it.
Yeah.
But Karsh completely throws that entire philosophy out the window.
Oh, absolutely. He doesn't use a net. It feels more like he drops a massive, heavy block of marble into the middle of his studio and he uses his camera as a chisel.
A chisel, I like that.
Yeah, he strips away a person's natural aura and physically forces his own meticulously designed geometry of authority onto them.
And that chisel metaphor is incredibly accurate when you look at how he engineered that Churchill portrait we were just talking about.
The 1941 shoot.
Right. Let's look at the cinematic reality of that day versus the monumental myth the photo actually created. So it's December 1941.
The absolute darkest, most terrifying days of World War II.
Exactly. Churchill is in Canada, and he has just finished delivering this exhausting, impassioned speech to the Parliament.
He's literally carrying the weight of a global conflict on his shoulders.
Right. He is highly stressed, physically drained, and crucially, he was completely ambushed by this photo shoot.
Wait, he didn't even know it was happening. No idea. He had no idea it was scheduled. He walks into this room, tells Karsh he has exactly 2 minutes, and he has his signature cigar clamped firmly in his mouth.
Of course he does.
I mean, in a room full of blinding lights and demands, that cigar is basically his protective shield. It's his pacifier.
And, a photographer operating with that butterfly net mentality would have just snapped the photo right then.
They would have.
They would have documented the heavy, exhausted reality of a prime minister leaning on a cigar for comfort.
But Karsh doesn't do that. Karsh stages this aggressive physical intervention. He walks right up to the Prime Minister of Great Britain, murmurs a quick apology, and literally snatches the cigar right out of his mouth.
The sheer audacity of doing that to one of the most powerful leaders on earth
Yes.
is staggering.
It's insane. And the resulting image, that famous furious glare, it's a provoked immediate physical response to a personal annoyance.
He's just mad about the cigar.
Exactly. Karsh forced the jaw to lock up. He forced the lips to push downward and the eyebrows to lower. He didn't wait for a moment of historical defiance. He manufactured it by irritating the man in front of him.
And in doing so, he fundamentally erased the vulnerable, overweight older man standing in that room.
Yeah, he totally rewrote the reality of the moment.
And he utilized his lighting equipment as a literal weapon to enforce that new narrative. I mean, Karsh hits Churchill with this incredibly harsh overhead lighting.
It's definitely not designed to be flattering.
Not at all. It's designed to brutally divide the face. One side is blasted with stark, visible authority, while the other side is plunged into deep, heavy shadow.
when I look at that lighting, it feels like it's creating immense physical volume.
Oh, for sure.
The deep shadow under the brow, the heavy darkness under the chin, it makes the head look like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Like he's turned a fleshy human face into a three-dimensional relief coin stamped out of solid iron.
That's a great way to put it. And that transformation into a monument is really locked into what Karsh does with the background.
Right, the pitch blackness.
Exactly. He stops down the lens aperture so drastically that the ambient light of the room simply ceases to register on the film negative. The Canadian Parliament just vanishes.
The specific time and place disappear entirely.
All that is left is the stark geometry he illuminated with his flash.
So by plunging the background into pitch blackness, he's literally robbing the viewer of context.
Right. Without a desk, a room, or an era to look at, you can't say, look at this tired man in his office.
You are forced into a psychological corner where you can only see pure monolithic power floating in a void.
It is a brilliant escalating series of manipulations.
It really is. And what makes Karsh a genius is that he takes this exact same architectural system of control and adapts it to totally different genres of power.
Different types of authority, yeah.
And I should mention, this content is based on research from SanalSergi.com, and their breakdown of his iconic portraits is just fascinating because it shows how adaptable this visual engineering really is.
Yeah, because if Churchill represents the raw physical geometry of aggressive power, we really have to look at how Karsh handles someone like Albert Einstein.
Right, a totally different vibe.
Exactly. Einstein represents the soft, internal authority of intellect. Karsh knows that not all authority shouts. Sometimes it whispers.
The Einstein portrait is a complete pivot from the war room. Churchill is leaning forward, almost invading your physical space through the lens.
Very aggressive.
But Einstein's body language is entirely different. He is pulled back. His hands are gently clasped together in front of him.
It's almost like a self-contained protective retreat into his own mind.
Yeah, he pulls his energy away from the lens entirely. His gaze drifts upward, completely bypassing the camera. He isn't looking at the viewer at all.
And the technical execution of the light mirrors that internal retreat beautifully.
How so?
Well, where Churchill's light was a harsh, directional weapon, Karsh hits Einstein with a large, diffuse light source.
Ah, so it's softer.
Much softer. This light wraps around the face, creating smooth gradients and filling in the harsh micro-shadows that would normally emphasize sagging skin or fatigue.
So instead of the harsh light highlighting the physical decay of an aging man, the diffused light turns his wrinkles into a deliberate roadmap of intellect.
Exactly. You look at those deep lines and you don't see age. You see the physical geography of a mind that unlocked the secrets of the universe.
Wow. So he's engineered the authority of the mind just as meticulously as he engineered the authority of war.
He really did.
Oh.
Which brings us to an even more complex manipulation.
Yeah.
What happens when the subject uses retreat not just to think, but to actively control you, the viewer?
Oh, we're talking about Audrey Hepburn now, aren't we?
We are. Karsh moves from the battlefield to the laboratory to the absolute peak of Hollywood elegance.
Now, this one is fascinating because we all know the classic visual language of submission.
Right. Tuck in the chin.
Yeah, if someone tilts their head down and tucks their chin toward their chest, they are making themselves smaller. It is classically a vulnerable, submissive posture.
But Karsh flips that completely.
He does. When you look at the Hepburn portrait, he somehow weaponizes that exact submissive posture into an impenetrable shield. Her head is tilted down, but her eyes are looking up sharply from under her brow, directly into the lens.
It creates a stark magnetic vector between her and the camera. Because, in traditional celebrity photography, the goal is accessibility.
Right. The celebrity smiles, offering themselves up for the public to consume.
But by utilizing that lowered angle and that specific upward gaze, Hepburn holds you at a distance. She projects this invisible perimeter around herself.
So elegance stops being just a physical trait and becomes an absolute mechanism of control.
Exactly. The focal length of the lens and the angle of the shot make her look completely untouchable. You are allowed to observe her, but you are not allowed to reach her.
It's an invisible, elegant shield.
And from an invisible shield, Karsh then tackles the challenge of a literal physical wall. Let's examine the portrait of Ernest Hemingway.
Oh, the Hemingway one is iconic.
Right. Hemingway's entire public persona was heavily fortified. He built this aggressive, hyper-masculine myth around himself.
The big game hunter, the deep-sea fisherman, the war correspondent who survived everything.
And it feels like Karsh deliberately dressed him in that massive, incredibly thick wool sweater as an architectural prop to fulfill that exact myth.
Oh, that sweater. It practically doubles Hemingway's size in the frame.
It's a fortress.
Yeah, he looks like an imposing masculine wall that you could crash a truck into without moving him.
But that is the central contradiction Karsh brilliantly builds into the image. Because the wardrobe projects the undeniable mass of the Hemingway myth, but then you look at the face.
Specifically the eyes.
Yes, there is zero aggression in Hemingway's gaze. It holds a bottomless, melancholic exhaustion.
The lighting emphasizes the deep, rough textures of his face, which creates this tragic friction with the softness of the wool sweater.
Right, Karsh gives you the massive structure of a giant, but the eyes tell the story of a fragile, broken resilience.
It is power that is heavily, painfully weighed down by a lifetime of hard living.
So we've seen Karsh use physical intervention with Churchill, environmental manipulation with Einstein,
Weaponized posture with Hepburn.
and wardrobe contradictions with Hemingway. But the most extreme example of his visual engineering happens when he encounters a subject who is, in his own right, a master manipulator of visual reality.
We have to talk about Pablo Picasso.
We do.
When you look at the Karsh portrait of Picasso, it breaks almost every rule of traditional portraiture. Half of Picasso's face is pitched into absolute, impenetrable blackness.
It is just void.
Pure void.
Yeah.
And a single, incredibly intense eye stares out at you from the edge of the shadows. Now, normally, throwing half a face into pitch black feels like a moody first-year art student cliche, you know?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But knowing Karsh's methodology, this has to be a highly structural, conceptual choice.
Oh, exactly.
It is a direct translation of Picasso's own philosophy into silver gelatin. Think about the core philosophy of the Cubist movement that Picasso pioneered.
Breaking things apart.
Right. He took the solid human form, fractured it, broke it into pieces, and reassembled it to show multiple conflicting perspectives at once. He fundamentally fragmented identity.
And photography inherently struggles to do that because a camera is a single lens perspective. It wants to show you a unified, solid object.
But Karsh finds a way. He uses aggressive lighting ratios, pushing the contrast of the film stock to drop half the face into pure void, effectively doing with light what Picasso did with paint.
He fractures the subject's identity.
Yes, he abandons the solid, immovable wholeness he used for Churchill. Picasso's authority in this image is built entirely out of absence, mystery, and unease.
That single illuminated eye emerging from the blackness is deeply unsettling.
It is, and it highlights a perceptual trap that Karsh utilizes across almost all his work.
It's true. Synthesizing all these portraits together, they all induce a feeling of claustrophobia.
Oh, big time.
He crops the frames incredibly tight. He often cuts off the hands or the shoulders. He drowns the backgrounds in darkness. He is essentially performing a sensory deprivation experiment on the viewer.
Boxing you in with these monolithic faces.
Right.
He turns the face into a meticulously directed stage play, and you are trapped in the front row.
Wow.
When you strip away the environment, the context, and the body, the illuminated eyes of the subject act as nails. They literally pin the viewer to the frame.
Your eye has nowhere else to wander, no background details to explore. You cannot look away from the psychological intensity he has designed.
Which brings us to a massive critical implication. We've mapped out an escalating series of lies here.
We really have. We've gone from snatching a cigar to provoke anger, to diffusing light to mac intellect.
To weaponizing a submissive posture.
Building a macho fortress out of a sweater.
And literally fragmenting a face into darkness.
So if every single element is a mathematical construction designed by the photographer, it forces us to ask, can we even call these photographs historical documents?
That is the big question. It introduces a profound tension between ultimate artistic mastery and historical manipulation. Because the reality of human existence, even for titans like Winston Churchill or Albert Einstein, is incredibly messy.
Yeah, humans are contradictory. We experience fear, fatigue, and profound moments of weakness.
But Karsh scrubs out that messy human reality entirely. He eliminates the complex person standing in his studio and replaces them with a purified, hyper-focused symbol.
And the staggering part is the sheer power of that substitution. The manufactured image eventually conquers reality entirely.
It really does. Over time, the packaged aesthetic becomes more permanent in our collective memory than the truth of what actually happened.
I mean, think about it. Today, no one remembers the exhausted, vulnerable, overweight Churchill of December 1941 who just wanted a moment of peace with his cigar.
No, we literally only remember the immovable god of war that Karsh invented in that room.
The camera here isn't reflecting history. It is actively, aggressively rewriting it.
And you can see just how deliberate this architectural approach is when you contrast Karsh with his contemporaries.
Right, like Richard Avedon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Photographers like Avedon operated on a completely different philosophy. Avedon wanted to destabilize his subjects. He wanted to shatter the celebrity mask to find the nervous, messy, trembling human underneath.
Or consider Irving Penn, who would physically wedge his subjects into tight corners constructed in his studio to reduce them to basic, almost abstract geometric forms.
But Karsh rejects both of those approaches. He doesn't expose the messy human beneath the myth, and he doesn't reduce them to abstract art.
Karsh imposes a monument. He decides what the historical narrative of that specific person should be, and he builds an inescapable visual structure to enforce it upon the rest of us.
It makes you realize just how vulnerable we are as viewers when we implicitly trust the camera lens.
And this isn't just an artifact of 20th century history. The aesthetic of power that Yousuf Karsh invented in his studio became the definitive blueprint for visual authority.
Which is exactly why this matters to you, listening right now.
Absolutely. The visual language Karsh perfected did not die with him. When you scroll through your social media feeds, when you watch political broadcasts, or when you see a tech CEO posing on the cover of a magazine today, that exact same machinery of authority is being weaponized against you.
The dramatically dropped lighting, the controlled gaze.
The deliberate erasure of messy context. It is all mathematically designed to make you feel a very specific emotion about the person in the frame.
It demands a completely new way of navigating the visual world.
Yeah.
I mean, the next time you encounter a quote-unquote powerful portrait, whether it is towering over you on a billboard or glowing on your phone screen, stop and ask yourself a fundamental question.
What's that?
Are you actually seeing the complex reality of that human being?
Yeah.
Or are you just absorbing the exact meaning that the person behind the camera wants you to feel?
That is such a crucial takeaway. The camera is never innocent. It is never a flawless mirror of reality. It is the architecture of it. And once you see the chisel marks left behind by the photographer, you will truly never look at a portrait the same way again. For more content, visit SanalSergi.com.